Hello and welcome. This presentation was prepared on the 10th anniversary of our association's journey in promoting landscape resilience in a homeowners association. Outside of communities that are originally designed around sustainability like Milagro Co-Housing or Savano, this is kind of unique for a common HOA to take on. So today I'll share not only the highlights and successes, but also some of the ongoing challenges as we continue to grow and learn. For those who are unfamiliar with Agua Dulce, we're a managed community of 411 homes located in the foothills of the Tucson Mountains, about 6 miles northwest of Tucson in southern Arizona. Our community is topographically rich, and it's traversed by two washes that you can see here in blue that drain into Roger Wash to the east, shown in purple. Zoom in a little further and you'll see our community hosts natural walking paths lined with native vegetation. Those walking paths follow the blue highlighted areas shown on this map and frequently cross washes and wildlife corridors shown in red, as you can see here on the map, which gives residents the opportunity to have close encounters with javelinas, bobcats, coyotes, mule deer, rabbits, owls, bats, and occasionally coatimundi, not to mention excellent bird watching opportunities. So it's really a nice place to live. Given our desert setting, our community has been sensitive to water and land conservation dating back to 2015 by promoting Pima County Smartscape Practices and adherence to irrigation guidelines recommended by Tucson Water. Thanks to the contribution of dedicated volunteers, our common areas host more than a dozen very modest water harvesting and erosion control features, which are regularly maintained. These are critical for preventing erosion of natural paths while providing an opportunity for higher quality rainwater to infiltrate naturally in support of our native vegetation. Thanks to these efforts, Agua Dulce is now recognized as a low impact development case study by Pima County and is also recognized by the National Wildlife Federation as a certified community wildlife habitat. As recently as 2024, our landscaper earned an Arizona Excellence in Landscape Award by adhering to our community's sustainable landscape practices. As a whole, associated practices and recognitions support real estate values and make Agua Dulce a desirable place to live. However, these successes have come with some growing pains. So on this 10-year anniversary, this is a great opportunity to share what we've learned. Since we're talking about managed communities, it's important to first share what it means to live in an HOA. Within my own HOA, residents pay monthly dues that are managed by an HOA board and management company to support services that might otherwise be handled by the city, with the ultimate goal of sustaining property values. After serving more than one term on my own HOA board and dealing with chronic landscape maintenance challenges, I learned something interesting about HOAs that is likely happening throughout the county. In the HOA common area paradigm, one property manager typically manages many accounts. In this role, the property manager pays the bills, hosts association meetings, and ensures actions are conducted in line with the association's bylaws. In turn, the association dues pay the bills, but residents don't always easily see what they're paying for various reasons, probably the most significant of which is it takes time to be involved in the management of a community. In turn, lack of oversight encourages high water use and landscape costs. High water use keeps the areas looking fresh at no cost to contractors. Removal of ground cover and mulch compounds demand for water, and poor pruning techniques requires frequent vegetation replacement. And here's a perfect example of what it means when you don't have proper oversight of your landscape. So here you can see that the area around the base of this mesquite has been excessively blown by our landscapers using blowers. This removes topsoil. It leaves vegetation subject to baking during the hot summer months, and that in turn requires more application of water on the landscape. And without proper oversight, this all basically feeds back into this loop. It's basically a degenerative loop that increases association costs for its members. With respect to water and shade, this paradigm puts us on a collision course with the broader realities of climate change and drought. So the question is there a different way? In regards to water conservation, an alternative approach is the one practiced by the Milagro Co-Housing community just a few minutes away from my own community in the Tucson Mountains. Unlike most developments that shed stormwater to streets and adjacent washes, This community stores this valuable resource in a suite of rainwater harvesting basins located in common areas. This results in free water being stored underground and available to native vegetation rather than the community having to rely on hoses and drip systems for watering. Back in 2013, I visited the community to see if the strategy actually works. I was welcomed by lush vegetation and shady paths, which I immediately assumed were being watered. I consulted with the association's leadership to find that, yes, watering does take place, but only when absolutely necessary by paying attention to the landscape and responding only when needed. Within our own community, stormwater was posing challenges by eroding our common area paths. The associated erosion contributes to safety risks in addition to increased maintenance fees, so in 2014 we consulted with Watershed Management Group on a strategy for mitigating the same. WMG noticed that our paths were actually the low point in the landscape, thus channeling water away from adjacent vegetation, being irrigated at association cost. So they recommended installing shallow swales across our paths to channel stormwater to newly developed water harvesting basins. By doing so, stormwater could realize benefits for our native landscape rather than contributing to maintenance costs for the association. To help with the labor, our association approved having WMG host a suite of workshops for members to help remedy these issues. We dug basins adjacent to our paths and used the excess fill to build swales that could channel runoff to the same. This was an amazing community building experience where we had an opportunity to get to know and make friends with neighbors and even individuals from outside our own community. This increased sense of community contributes to greater safety since we're now more aware of what's going on during volunteer events and evening walks. Seeing respective benefits and being sensitive to the fact that we live in a managed community, our board approved the creation of a Water Harvesting Erosion Control Committee in March of 2015. A little more than 10 years to the date. This paved the way for future conservation and erosion control activities, while also holding committee members personally responsible for maintaining these efforts over time. And in line with our charter, we invited Tucson Water to have our common area irrigation evaluated by a conservation specialist. Tucson Water informed us that we had an irrigation scheduling problem in that we weren't following scientific guidelines for watering, essentially to cut back during the winter months when plants are dormant and increase as needed during our summer months prior to the monsoon. In response, we shared the report with our common area landscapers for adjustment. Our landscapers did a better job of scheduling and also being vigilant about leaks and not irrigating our common areas immediately after a monsoon storm. This is something that happens frequently in HOAs, and unless someone takes notice and escalates, it's likely to be deferred as someone else's problem. In fact, closely monitoring our water in line with Tucson Water guidelines has not only been one of the easiest things we've done, it's also been one of the most impactful. Through 2021, the cumulative efforts yielded over a 50% reduction in our yearly consumption across all meters. This is accomplished without having to purchase and install tanks throughout the community at significant cost, or create unnecessary demand for plastic, which we know is impacting the environment and human health. In regards to climate change resiliency, consider that water is heavy, with one full 870-gallon tank coming in at just under 4 tons. Since Tucson Water imports water from the Colorado River, each tank of water saved offsets having to pump that water uphill for 336 miles through an unlined channel in the desert subject to evaporation over an elevation of 2,900 feet. This avoids the greenhouse gas emissions required to pump that water uphill to Tucson, so there's no question that saving water is not only important for sustainability, but realizes climate benefits by diminishing our reliance on energy emissions for moving the same. Promoting more shade to offset the impacts of a warming climate has also been important to us. One challenge we share with commercial properties and other HOAs is poor pruning practiced by commercial landscapers on common area shrubs and trees. This poor Palo Verde is a perfect example, which for years was the first tree people would see upon entering our community. At the time, this tree was planted over 20 years ago, but you wouldn't know it from its poor state resulting from lion-tailing. Needless to say, this does little to promote property values. As explained to me by a certified arborist, lion-tailing results from the thinning of all the intercanopy branches back to 2 or 3 leader branches on the main trunk of a tree. This is poor practice since the inner canopy is essential for taking advantage of food production during low light conditions of dawn and dusk. So when that production is lost, the tree has a physiological response in growing long and weak. Up until 2022, most of the trees in our association suffered from this kind of pruning, which in turn contributes to breakage during high winds and subsequently loss of shade. Sometimes this practice would take place where cuts yielded absolutely no benefit in terms of improving traffic or walker visibility and/or safety. Rather, only exposed trunks to sunburn, stressing out the trees to the point of requiring their removal and replacement. We suspect this happened as a result of our landscape contract requiring our landscapers to visit the association twice a week to maintain a slow-growing desert landscape. The respective challenges were documented as far back as 2018, and to leadership's credit, our common area chair did respond, asking that work crews back off a bit on the pruning. But the issue required constant vigilance due to the high turnover within the landscape work crews, which in turn required constant reminding and retraining. The problem with this approach is it can take years to recover from one bad haircut, so it only takes one poorly trained landscaper a few hours to undo years of careful maintenance. Understandably, most associations will just let it go and consider vegetation replacement a cost of doing business, especially given the relatively low pay, high turnover, and lack of training typically witnessed by our boots-on-the-ground crews. Having said that, it's painful to walk our common areas and witness this approach. This concludes the summary of our 10-year anniversary for these ongoing efforts. I want to thank everyone shown on this slide for your help and support over the years. If you're interested in taking a leadership role in your own community, please check the description of this video for resources that might help. Catch you next time.